Hey guys, I'm Jacinta Robinson and welcome to the Fearlss podcast, where I interview incredible athletes or specialists in the area of health. Today's guest specializes in mobility. He went from not even being able to touch his toes to having back pain after most workouts, where now he can do a pancake split, handstands, and much more. On the podcast today, we talk about how mobility can help your performance and also prevent injuries. We also speak about specific skills and what things you could focus on, and if you're sitting at a desk, some great movements that you can implement so that you can prevent any injuries or locked up shoulders or low back pain. I'd like to welcome John Lindsey. Welcome to the podcast, John. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell the listeners a little bit about, like, if they go onto Instagram, they'll see heaps about you and you're all about mobility. So tell me, how did you get into the realm of mobility?
So I'm 31 now. I've been a personal trainer for about 10 years. And when I was probably 23, 24, I was in grad school for an exercise science related master's degree. And I was also personal training on the side. And I was starting to just hear things about mobility. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Kelly Starrett, Mobility Wad, that sort of thing. And I also was starting to recognize in myself that I just didn't move well. Like after any lower body lift day, like I usually had some lingering back pain for a couple days. I could never touch my toes. I always just thought, well, I'm just inflexible. Like this is just genetic. There's nothing I can do. And anytime I try to stretch, I'd kind of just revert back to the stuff you do in sports, like just kind of hanging out and touch your toes, the typical like piriformis stretch, things like that. This shoulder across the body stretch, like very basic stuff. And at the same time, I was also training people and teaching them how to move better and stretch. And in reality, I really didn't know what I was doing. So I kind of just went on in a kind of down a rabbit hole myself, did a deep dive on mobility work, and that hole just gets deeper and deeper. I continue to be interested in it and continue to just find new techniques that work well with me and clients. And yeah, it's just become an obsession over the past like 6-7 years.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And so, like, do you think that's a common thing that you see with people, that they are focused more on the strength sort of side, like going heavier all the time, rather than creating mobility throughout their whole muscle and their joints?
I think so, yeah, definitely. And I think the main reason is like with strength training or anything where you're lifting weights, you at least get the instant gratification of like a pumped muscle where you're like, okay, I can tell I did something here. Whereas with mobility work, you don't really get that. You might get out of breath and you might, after a session, feel like you gained a few degrees of range of motion. But for a lot of people, it's not that satisfying. And like to really make progress takes a lot of consistency and a lot of time spent where you're not getting that instant gratification. So I understand why it's why people don't do it. It's not instantly rewarding. But to me, like I said earlier, I just was like, I've got to do this. Like I've got to at least attempt. And as I started to see progress, which did take a few weeks, a few months, I was hooked immediately. So I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they're not consistent with it enough to see that a little bit of progress. Because I think once you see a little bit of progress and you start to move better or feel better, you're like, okay, clearly something's changed. Let's keep going down this path.
Yeah. And when you say they're not consistent, like how long are we talking about during a week? Is it like after every training session? Are we talking every couple of days? Like how often should we be working on mobility?
Well, it depends on your goals. I think if your goals are just you have some other modality you really like, whether it's a sports or it's weightlifting, powerlifting, CrossFit, whatever it is. If you do that stuff, then you probably just need a mobility routine. I need to make sure my joints work well. I own these ranges of motion before I put them under load, doing snatches or heavy lifting, whatever it is. And someone like that, I'm just taking a good 25, maybe 30 minutes, 4 or 5 days a week can go a long, long way. It just has to be the right tools. Again, like I said earlier, my stretching used to be I'd revert back to what I did in youth soccer, just trying to like touch my toes, cross an arm over my chest, like very basic stuff. So with the right stimulus, I mean, 25 to 30 minutes of 4 or 5 days a week of good hard work can go a long, long way. And you'd see some progress within a month for sure.
Yeah.
But if your goal is more, I want to improve mobility positions, like you want a front split, a middle split, stuff like that, then that's going to take 45 minutes to an hour on that one position at least twice a week, something like that. So, depending on your goals, but at a minimum, like 25 minutes.
Yeah. And so listen, like for the listeners, right? And they're listening and they're like, oh, okay, this sounds really important, but like how important are we talking about? Like what are the common problems that you see in your clients or in the industry on people that don't work on their mobility? What are some things that you see?
So just forcing positions you don't own. And I mean, the human body is really resilient. You can force a position, whether it's something as simple as like down dog in yoga, or something pretty serious like an overhead snatch, holding that in the bottom. The human body is going to be pretty resilient to that if you don't own that range over and over, but eventually it's going to break and say, hey, we've stretched the body too far, like, and then pain or an injury is going to present itself somewhere in the body. So I like to look at a position people like to do, whether it's, again, those two examples like down dog in yoga or overhead snatch, and look at each joint by joint and say, okay, this joint needs to be able to get here on its own. This joint needs to be able to get here on its own. Let's break that down, work on the shoulder independently of the thoracic spine independently of the hip. And then when you go to put all that stuff together to do your position or your exercise, your movement, whatever it is, you're going to be much more set up, and the likelihood of an injury is going to go down drastically. And honestly, the efficiency of the lift or the movement should go up as well too.
Yeah. I noticed like we did a test with my partner. She was running. She was trying to improve her running. So we did an hour mobility session after all of her sessions throughout the week. And then her running time improved. I think it was like she was running five. I think her pace was 5 something, just over 5. And then it went down to 4:26. And we were
Oh
like,
man,
holy smokes, like over an 8-week period, that was huge.
that's awesome. Yeah, so that's a good example. Like running is just a movement pattern. You can tell your body to run, and you might be lacking like a little bit of hip extension or something like that. And so you're relying on explosion from the ankle to knee. And then maybe once you create more active hip extension, you're going to be so much faster because you've already got the aerobic capacity. You're just now have a more efficient machine to use that aerobic capacity on.
Mm. And then tell us, John, like a lot of society, especially right now with COVID, we're all kind of inside and a lot of people are at desks, and you would see that roundedness through the back, and then the hips are all cramped up from sitting a lot. What are some great exercises that you would recommend for people that are sitting a lot?
So kind of the two areas of the body you just essentially described, the thoracic spine and the shoulder. So sitting like that, you're robbing yourself of shoulder external rotation. So I really like lightweight Cuban rotations, which is kind of an old school, like almost strength exercise where you're moving your shoulder, kicking your elbow at 90 degrees, just moving it into as much external rotation as you can, but doing that with a light load, slowly controlling the whole movement and trying to pull into as much external rotation as possible. It's huge. It's awesome for people that sit for extended periods of time. And then on top of that, the thoracic spine, I really like passive range press up holds. So think of a kind of traditional like press up in yoga, or maybe it's called Cobra as well, where you're just, is that right?
Yeah.
So pressing up, not into a full position there, but enough where you feel like, okay, if I let go, I can still hang on here unassisted, and I'm really extending my thoracic spine. Slowly let go of your hands, hang on there for like 5, maybe 10 seconds. Put your hands back down again, press up into a little bit more passive range, try to hold again. Like that's a fantastic move for someone that hangs out in spine flexion a lot, opening that up and getting more extension.
Yeah. And then what about the hips?
So the hips, I mean, sitting for an extended period of time, you're robbing yourself of number one, rotation. Like if you're just sitting in this stuck position, your hips are not going to rotate well. So one of my favorites is I just like lying on, I just call them sideline hip rotations. You're lying on your side, your knees are bent, you elevate your top leg, and then from there you just up and making in your end range, your internal and external rotation. That's a fantastic drill for someone who desk all day. You're also missing a lot of hip extension. So a move I like a lot is called a long lunge hold, where it's pretty much exactly what it sounds. You're standing in a long lunge, like feet very, very long, and you're dropping your back knee down. So you feel a little bit of a hip flexor stretch, but the whole time you're holding, so it's 30 seconds, maybe up to a minute, you're trying to straighten your knee. So if someone were to do that, you'd instantly feel like, oh my gosh, this is really stretching my hip flexor. So the goal there is being active the entire time, trying to actively straighten the knee the entire time. So for the hips, you're robbed of hip rotation and you're robbed of hip extension.
Yeah. And do you think that people should be doing that more regularly? Like as in like, let's say you've been sitting for like 5 hours and hop up and do that a little bit and then go back to work, or?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
A better protocol would be try to reduce sitting as much as you can. I mean, like, I feel like nowadays any office should be able to allow you to have a stand-up desk. And it's not that standing is so much better than sitting because it's still a static posture. But when you're standing, like I'm standing right now, and I've changed my hip position probably 45 times since we've been talking, and that just happens naturally. And just a little bit of a change is huge for not letting your hips get super, super tight. So I would encourage anyone to get a stand-up desk or stack a box. You don't have to get something expensive. You can stack a box on your desk, prop the computer up there. Like you'll notice instantly it's tough to get comfortable in one static, the way your feet are oriented, your hips are oriented all the time. And then if you're able to do a little bit of mobility work, like the stuff I just described, on top of that, that's an excellent work day.
Yeah. So tell us the difference between holding a stretch for a long time and mobility. What's the benefit of, like which one's probably the better one, would you say, for the body?
So when you say hold the stretch for an extended period of time, I think of that as flexibility. Like you're allowing gravity or maybe another limb in the body to force that stretch. So like a traditional touch the toe stretch, you're just trying to reach your hands to your toes. That's just letting gravity pull you down. And that might make you some progress over a long period of time, but a much better stimulus is actively moving in and out of a position. So we could take that exercise, trying to touch our toes, and sub that for just a body weight good morning. So essentially standing with your feet together and just actively driving your hips back, and eventually you'll get to a big hamstring stretch, and try to just pull into that. Actively try to just pull your chest lower and lower. And then when you return, drive the feet into the ground. Just by doing that, you're training your muscle to be comfortable throughout the range of motion there. And that's how you create more range of motion change, is you created that body-mind connection of your brain saying, okay, we're at end range here, but we've stimulated the muscle and I understand. So the next time we go back there, I'm going to be comfortable in there. I'm going to allow you to get a little further. That's something you don't get with passive stretching.
Mm. Yeah, I've noticed that too when I've been using weights, when I've done like the Jefferson curl and just using that light weight, I've been able to get so much more range than just bending over and grabbing it, because it forces you into that movement. Mm.
Totally.
So tell us, what do you think would be, like, let's say if we eliminated the strength component or any sort of like cardiovascular, like running or bike, right? And the people that are listening want to focus on some movements that create strength, but also create mobility and range throughout their body. what are some specific skills that you would recommend? Like, I mean, like, you know, like a pistol squat, would that be the best thing for the legs, or what do you think would be the best bang for your buck?
That's a great example for a lower body drill because, I mean, if you are able to execute a pistol squat correctly, you probably have pretty good ankle mobility, pretty good knee mobility, pretty good hip mobility. And you also have pretty good hip flexion mobility, the leg that's extended, being able to lift it up. So that would be a great example of a lower body drill that would be good. Because when I program like a pistol squat for people and they don't have it, a lot of what we have to program, it's not just regressing the drill, doing it off a box. It's okay, let's attack the ankle, let's get that more mobile, let's get the knee more mobile, let's get the hip more mobile, and then we'll put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Another lower body one I like a lot is a sissy squat, where you're essentially, I don't know if you're familiar, but you're on the balls of your feet and you're keeping a straight line from your knee to your shoulders, and you're tapping your knees on the floor and coming back up. That's a really good example of hip flexor and quad mobility, as well as it takes a lot of foot strength too. So there's actually a lot of mobility through the foot, through the big toe going on. So those are two I like a lot. I like anything training the hamstring to end range. Like you mentioned Jefferson curls, that's a great example. Yes, it's a mobility drill, but there's so much strength involved there as well. So that's a good one for the posterior chain. As far as upper body goes, I love hand balancing. I love handstand training, and no one needs to get too serious with that. But if you were to just train it, so your goal being like, I would just want to hold a 20 to 30 second handstand, something like that. The overhead, I just touched my fan. The overhead mobility for that would be huge. That's the toughest thing for a lot of people, is they have a lack of thoracic spine extension to get completely upright, and they're missing some shoulder flexion to get overhead. So handstands are fun to do, and they're honestly, once you can have one with a really good line, you're probably going to have great upper body mobility as well.
Yeah. And would you say that even if you have like the mobility up, like the upper body mobility, you need to have that hamstring flexibility for you to be able to get up easily, or does that not matter?
If you were going to do it like a press to handstand, then yeah, you would need a pretty good level of hamstring mobility, because you have to have your hands flush on the floor with your knees locked. So that'd be a good representation of hamstring mobility. If your goal is to just kick up and hold a handstand, not so much. But I think if someone's interested in handstands, they're probably also interested in like getting the entire body moving well. So why not work the hamstrings as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that when I tried to kick up, if I've loosened off the hamstrings, I find it a lot easier to hop up. But if I haven't done that, then I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like running and doing like almost like a kick into the air. So tell us about, John, tell us a little bit more about you. What do you do for training? Do you just work on mobility, or are you doing strength, or like what's your training regime?
So I do a fair amount of strength work. I do 2 days of pushing work, upper body pushing work, which is centered around trying to get the Stalder press, which is where you're in a straddle and you press up into a handstand from there. So I'm very close on that. But with that, I end up doing some dumbbell military press in that session. I do a little bit of tricep work too. So it's not all body weights. I'll do 2 days of pulling work, which is mostly centered around chin-ups, pull-ups, that sort of thing. But I also do some bicep curls at the end to help assist with that. So there's a fair amount of weight training in my upper body sessions. Lower body, I'm always trying to work on a lower body skill. So I'm working on kind of perfecting the dragon squat, which is like a leg, sounds like you're familiar, leg going around the planted leg, pistol squats. So that's kind of the centerpiece of that workout. I'll do some Nordic curls for the backside, and then also some sissy squats. Those are pretty easy, usually pretty light sessions, because my lower body mobility work is front splits and middle splits. And although that sounds like stretching, because I'm working it in a mobility way rather than a flexibility way, there's so much muscle engagement working, I'm very sore from that. So my lower body days can't be too taxing.
Mm. And because you just said you do a fair bit of strength training, would you say that why would you focus on doing the weight training rather than more of like a calisthenics routine? What's the benefit of using weights?
So I do my two upper body days, a push day and a pull day. They're both centered around calisthenics skills, a stalder press, and then also, I guess I'm trying to progress to a pin up or a one arm pull up on the rings. But I do some weight training to assist with that. And the main reason is some of that calisthenics work, if you're repeating it, it can be really taxing on the body. But then at the end of it, you still want to do some accessory work. You still have some gas in the tank, but kind of jumping on your hands, doing hand balancing, that can get tiring and the quality can go down. So pushing work that accompanies that well, like the military press, is much easier to execute. Although muscularly taxing, it's not as, I guess, neurologically taxing. So that's why I usually do some strength work at the end. And then for the pulling work, a lot of different bicep curl variations. They're easy to execute and they assist well with the pulling muscles. The bicep works a lot in those, the ring chin-ups.
Yeah. And do you think from doing more of this mobility work, you've become more conscious of your limitations within your body and it's developed you better as a movement specialist? Like, I'm just trying to think of, if someone's listening, they're like, wow, this sounds amazing, but what is the actual, like, I know like it's going to help with injury and it's going to help with doing movements better, but do you believe that they become more conscious of what they're doing, so then they're able to know exactly how to progress their skills?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good about listening to my body, but that's probably come more so from messing up on things and being like, okay, I was too taxed. Why did I even try that? I would say the biggest kind of what you're going off of thing for me that I love about just being more mobile is you can just tell your body's capable of more things. Like something as simple as like getting on and off the floor. I'll do it with a Cossack squats, or I'll like roll over, like I'll do like some sort of like tumbling exit to the floor, like cool stuff like that. Like, and it's so much fun to use your body in space like that, even when you're not working out. So that's kind of the biggest thing I've noticed is, yeah, it's cool to train these positions like front splits and get them and forward fold, hands to the ground. But it's fun because I am a personal trainer. So working with people, I'm moving around constantly. I'm having to get on the floor constantly, having to show people things constantly. It's so cool to have a body that works so efficiently. And I think as you do more and more, you realize that and you're like, this is awesome. Like I used to be not a challenge to get off the floor, but it used to be work. Now it's like absolutely nothing. So that's the coolest thing to me about kind of the progress I've made and how I kind of randomly used it.
Yeah. And I think you would feel amazing being able to just move. You don't have that like back pain or feeling uncomfortable trying to get into those ranges. Yeah, totally.
You definitely notice when you haven't moved in a while, though. You can like sense, I feel like I just need to move my spine around. Like you can tell, I can tell when I've been static for too long. So. Which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You become more conscious. So tell us about on Instagram, you don't wear a lot of shoes and you have these things that you put between your toes. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
So that was another thing. When I, in graduate school, I was realizing I was moving terribly. Like on a little bit of my research, I started like looking at minimalist shoes, and I realized the shoes that I had worn for over 2 decades of my life had just been crappy, super thick heeled shoes, very tight toe box, like not a lot of room to move the toes in. And so started experimenting with going barefoot, invested in minimalist shoes. And now I'm just addicted to working out and doing anything really I can barefoot. It's so obvious the body isn't meant to be stuck in shoes all day. And so I also, the toe spaces you described, those just help restore optimal structure to a foot. So it's been years since I wore a crappy shoe, but I still was wearing crappy shoes for like 23 years probably. So I like to wear those, even if I've been wearing minimalist shoes all day. I like to wear those. I think it just feels so good to spread the toes and get the foot back to its optimal structure. And a lot of times working out barefoot, you just feel more connected to the ground. So if you are doing some of the lower body skill stuff like sissy squat, pistol squats, dragon squats, it's nice to kind of feel like really connected to the ground. You can definitely tell there's a difference the way you can sort of grip the ground barefoot than you could with even a minimalist shoe on.
Yeah. And would you say a lot of it's really important to not wear the shoes so that you can create more mobility throughout the ankle and movement throughout the foot?
Definitely. It's improving mobility in the foot, the toes, the ankle, and it's also getting them stronger too. I mean, shoes are necessary and sometimes, but I mean, they do rob you of your ankle strength, your foot strength, and your mobility as well. So, I mean, I encourage everyone to go barefoot as much as they can.
I've started doing some of my at-home training videos barefoot, and you can definitely tell like the difference in working the foot than if you're used to using shoes all the time. Like my feet were sore after doing the workout.
Yeah. That's a sign you should do it more often.
I have this theory. I've had flat feet like from when I was younger, and I had this theory that I'm going to fix my feet, right? Develop all the strength. Because in my head, I'm like, okay, it's just a muscle that I haven't used. So now I'm developing that strength. And a lot of people have told me over the past that I need to wear these orthotics. And so I did for my younger years, but now I've completely got rid of the orthotics and my feet are getting stronger and I can stand without having to feel like I need to sit down. And I think that's a really good indication. Like you said, it's feedback of the body saying, okay, it's time to work this, because if you don't work this, you're going to have knee problems and back problems and everything else.
Yeah, totally. The foot will be the first to go, but it's going to be a trickle up effect. So good on you. That's a tough journey. I know a lot of people that are already on the orthotics. They're already like, there's no way you're going to get them to reduce that cushion in the shoe. They're already so comfortable with that. So that's great on you to recognize that and take action.
I think you can fix it. I just think it's whether you want to or not. That's it.
Yeah, totally. And it's way more work than putting a orthotic in your shoe.
So tell us, John, what's your, like you did say you were perfecting a few skills, but what's the skill that you haven't achieved right now that you really wanted to? Like you said, the one arm pull up and chin up on the rings, but what are some other skills that you're working towards?
So the Stalder press is probably my most like right there skill. I'm so close. I've actually done a sloppy one once. That's the skill I really want to like fine tune and get really, really good. I just think that's such it's a great expression of mobility, and it's such to me, aesthetically pleasing skill to seeing done. So I really want to get good at that. I want my middle split to get a little better. Those are probably the two, like top two things for sure.
Yeah. And then tell us, John, what's your advice for everybody that's listening? Like your top 5 tips on people to increase their mobility?
Be consistent with it. I mean, find good information and take that information and be consistent with it. If it's something you're going to do 4 or 5 days a week, don't let 3 days go by where you don't do it. You've got to create the habit. Because like I said about myself, like once you see that success a few weeks or maybe a couple months in, and you really start to see like, oh my gosh, I'm getting this position I never thought I could. I'm clearly making progress towards whatever position. That's when you'll get stuck. So just be consistent and keep chipping away at it, and it will pay dividends for sure. On top of that, something I always say to a lot of people is, you only get one body. Don't mess it up. Like, don't fight through even like a little bit of pain. Like if you're in a lifting session, you've noticed, okay, I've done this workout twice now, and I always have this kind of lingering shoulder thing. It's not painful, but it's like uncomfortable. Do a little self-assessment, or have somebody do an assessment on you and find out what's wrong, because that's only going to get worse. The human body is super resilient, and it'll help fight through a lot of stuff. But once it's too much, it's going to be too much, and something bigger could happen. So you only get one body. Do not mess it up. Treat that thing as best you can.
Yeah. I think that's very, very good advice for a lot of people, because we get so focused on doing more rather than having a listen in and what could be sustainable for life. Cool. All right. So how do people get in contact with you, John? Like, I know that we did mention Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
It's at The Movement Journey, just all one word. And that would be the best way. I do have a website that's themovementjourney.com, and some YouTube resources as well. I have an app that I launched recently, and I also work with the Ultra team out in Australia. They have an app for mobility work as well that I head on that. But you could find all that if you went to my Instagram page and clicked on the link in my bio. That would take you to kind of every service I offer and some free YouTube stuff as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll get some of the listeners in there, because if you are listening in, John is incredible. When you check out his Instagram videos, it's like, how the hell are you doing it? But yes, it does make sense that consistency over a long period of time, anybody can achieve that, which is fantastic to hear for us all. Cool. Well, thank you so much for jumping on the potty today, John. It's been a really interesting having you on and learning about the importance of mobility for the body.
Absolutely. I enjoyed that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening in, guys. If you're on Apple, please leave a 5-star written review. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. All right, I'll see you next week with the next inspiring story.